Let's talk about the absolute masterclass of cinematic manipulation. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to completely unpack the hidden mechanics, the psychological tricks, and the brilliant problem solving behind legendary filmmaking. We're looking at the ultimate toolkit directors use to control exactly what you see, what you feel, and ultimately what you believe. Let's dive right in.
So, how do you make an audience hold its breath? It's the golden question, right? Every filmmaker asks it, but very few actually pull it off. Well, the secret to real suspense isn't just throwing in more explosions or car chases. It's a meticulously crafted illusion. It's about engineering this incredibly specific situation where you, the viewer, are literally squirming in your seat, and it's happening entirely by design. Which brings us to part one, designing the ultimate suspense. To build tension across a massive, sprawling landscape, kind of like what we see in the classic 1942 thriller Saboteur, you absolutely need a MacGuffin. If you're not familiar, a MacGuffin is just a plot device. Think of something really simple, like a pair of handcuffs locked onto a wrongfully accused hero. The handcuffs themselves, they don't have any deep philosophical meaning, but what they do is instantly create urgency. They force our hero to keep moving, keep hiding, and drive that plot forward from one crazy location to the next. And when you're moving characters around, notice the stark contrast in how you can trap them. The rookie instinct is almost always a physical trap, a locked room or a creepy ghost town. But the true genius of isolation isn't locking a hero in an empty space, it's trapping them in a crowded grand ballroom. Just imagine it. You're surrounded by hundreds of high society folks, but your enemies are waiting at every single exit. If you scream for help, everyone's just going to think you've lost your mind. Honestly, that psychological trap is way more terrifying than any locked door. Now, this macro-level plotting ultimately builds down to micro-level visual tension. To really master this, you've got to juxtapose the massive with the totally trivial. Take the iconic finale of Saboteur on the Statue of Liberty. First, you establish the sweeping, grand scale of the towering monument. Next, you suspend a guy in mid-air over a fatal drop. But here is the true stroke of genius. You step all the way down to the terrifying intimacy of a single thread tearing on a jacket sleeve. Taking the audience from this dizzying height down to the smallest, most fragile little detail, that is what really makes your stomach drop. But here's the catch. A true masterclass in suspense requires intense discipline. Look at this wild list of set pieces. A handcuffed hero leaping from a bridge, a really tense encounter with a blind man, a deserted ghost town, a massive chase across Boulder Dam. They are all incredible ideas. But if you throw in too many brilliant ideas without carefully pruning them, you actually end up cluttering your dramatic curve. Having a bunch of great ideas just isn't enough. They have to be perfectly selected to serve the overall story. All right, moving on to part two, the psychology of villains. Let's plunge into the dark psychology of characters, specifically looking at the mechanics of Shadow of a Doubt. In a great psychological thriller, visual motifs do the heavy lifting, telling the story without a single word of dialogue. Check out these subtle cues. Use thick, heavy black smoke pouring from a train engine to subconsciously signal that, hey, the devil is arriving in this quiet little town. You take a haunting tune, like The Merry Widow, and pair it with dancing couples to hint at a seriously dark past. Or you have a character intentionally spill a glass of wine at dinner just to create a messy diversion when the conversation gets a little too close to the truth. That is pure visual storytelling. The crucial takeaway here is that villains aren't all black and heroes aren't all white. We're dealing with grays everywhere. The most fascinating antagonist is never just a mindless monster. It's a killer with an ideal. It's a guy who genuinely feels he has this righteous mission to destroy what he sees as corrupt. When you give your villain a warped but totally steadfast moral code, you are forcing your audience right into a deeply uncomfortable moral gray area. And the emotional core of that gray area hinges on one incredibly tragic truth. You destroy the thing you love. We see this beautifully play out when a young, adoring niece discovers her charming uncle's horrific secret. Because of her own moral compass, she is ultimately forced to defeat the exact person she idolizes. It's heartbreaking, really, and it's exactly what elevates a standard thriller into a psychological masterpiece. Next up, part three, confined spaces, global conflict. So here's a massive challenge. How on earth do you trap humanity's global conflicts inside a single, tiny lifeboat? Well, recognizing that 80% of psychological thriller footage was already being shot in close-ups anyway, filming an entire movie inside a small boat was a radical experiment. It was this crazy exercise in the absolute unity of space that, to be honest, totally anticipated the tight, character-driven style of modern television way before it was cool. The camera literally never goes outside the boat. By restricting the space like that, the boat becomes this perfect, strict microcosm for World War II. Think about it. You've got the survivors representing the democracies. They're totally disorganized, constantly clashing over conflicting ideals, and dangerously indecisive when crisis hits. On the flip side, the enemy captain is unified, has a single-minded focus, and is incredibly authoritative. It was an objective, chilling setup that basically told audiences, look, if you don't put aside your petty differences and unify, this highly determined adversary is going to take full control. And within this tiny, confined space, we get to meticulously track the characters' moral journeys through what they physically endure. Just watch the gradual discarding of superficial material stuff. On day 1, a super sophisticated typewriter, basically a symbol of modern career and status, just falls into the water and it's gone. By day 15, as starvation really sets in, material wealth means absolutely nothing. And then, by day 30, a priceless gold bracelet is being used purely as fish bait. It's such a brilliant way to visually strip away all of civilization until nothing but primal survival is left. This whole ordeal eventually reduces the survivors to this tight huddle, honestly resembling a pack of wild dogs from a distance. It creates this incredibly powerful moral fable. It shows us how terrifyingly fast civilized, sophisticated people can devolve into a savage, instinctual pack when they're pushed to their absolute limits. It's a dark mirror held right up to society, all contained within the wooden hull of a tiny boat. Finally, Part 4, The Master's Hidden Signatures. To wrap up our masterclass, I've got a really fun puzzle for you. How exactly does a director, who is famous for cameoing in every single one of his movies, manage to appear in a film set entirely in the middle of the ocean? I mean, if your whole signature is popping up in the background, but your characters are stranded at sea, you can't exactly stroll past them on the sidewalk, right? The solution is just brilliant. They float an old, soggy piece of newspaper in the bottom of the boat. And right there, on the page, is an advertisement for this totally fake weight loss drug called Reduco, complete with before and after photos. Well, those photos were actually the director documenting his real-life weight loss journey, cleverly disguised as a prop. It just goes to show the crazy lengths a great filmmaker will go to in order to keep their personal signature without ever breaking the reality of the scene. And speaking of reality, behind the scenes, achieving that perfect, authentic, mundane look often requires an absolutely absurd amount of hidden effort. Take this real-world story about finding a location. Step 1, you find the perfect, slightly weathered, realistic house in a small town. Step 2, the owner is so insanely thrilled that a movie is being shot there, they eagerly repaint the entire house bright and new right before the crew shows up. Step 3, the production team literally has to beg for permission to painstakingly paint the house dirty and old all over again. And then, step 4, they have to repaint it bright and new once shooting finally wraps. That is the invisible sweat that goes into making something look totally normal on screen. But even when a master storyteller steps away from big Hollywood thrillers to craft something like wartime propaganda shorts, they refuse to just keep it simple. Instead of basic, boring messaging, they weave in complex structural tricks. They might use a journey retold format, replaying a character's trip to reveal all these hidden espionage clues that we totally missed the first time around. Or they'll lean into inner conflict, actually daring to expose the real, messy political divisions and arguments within allied resistance forces, rather than just painting this fake, rosy picture of perfect harmony. Ultimately, understanding all these hidden tools completely transforms how you watch movies. Every single shadow, every prop, every confined space, it is all a deliberate choice. It proves that the real magic doesn't happen by accident. It happens entirely by design. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. Next time you sit down to watch a thriller, ask yourself, are you simply watching a story unfold, or is the director playing you like an instrument? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and remember to keep your eyes wide open.